My name is Robin Dixon with Alliant International University in the Psychology, Public Policy, and Law PhD program. And today I'll be discussing sexually violent predators in Florida, focusing on definition, diagnoses that are known to be sexually violent offenders, legal framework and its effectiveness, and policy concerns. To guide this discussion, I will define sexually violent predators, review the DSM-5 diagnoses that are at an increased risk of sexual predation, discuss Florida's Jimmy Rice Act, evaluate effectiveness of said act, and discuss ethical concerns. So what is a sexually violent predator? This refers to anyone who has been convicted of a sexually violent offense and who suffers from a mental abnormality or personality disorder that makes the person likely to engage in acts of sexual violence. This focuses on future risk, not just past behavior, and it's in congruence with Florida Statute 394.912. Clinically, sexually violent predators are often diagnosed with paraphilic disorders, such as pedophilic or sexual sadism. However, these predators are also cited in studies regarding those with personality disorders, more specifically antisocial personality disorder, borderline, and even narcissistic personality disorders. Furthermore, substance abuse disorders can increase the risk of sexually violent predation due to how they often lower their users' inhibitions while increasing their levels of impulsivity. Florida's Jimmy Rice Act was in response to a sexually violent predator on parole that kidnapped, beat, raped, and dismembered a 9-year-old boy on his way home from school. According to this act, the court can impose civil commitments of sexually violent predators after the completion of their prison sentence if the individual is still considered dangerous. It is a civil process aimed at treatment and public safety, though confinement can be extended. This is often due to the state-managed monitoring if they are released. For instance, they do have an electronic tracking program, so that way people that are deemed violent and likely to reoffend can be monitored by at all times through the state. So this figure shows the evaluation outcomes of the Jimmy Rice program, and this was found on the National Institute of Justice 2021 data. And this shows that most individuals are not committed. Rather, it indicates selectivity and reliance on risk assessment tools that may not be perfectly reliable. So sexually violent predator laws can enhance public safety when they do incapacitate high-risk individuals. However, the limitations include invalid risk assessment prediction errors, evaluator disagreement, and even high costs of keeping them housed, fed, and away from the public. This can ultimately lead to violent offenders being paroled without successfully completing their programs. Another major concern is the balance between civil liberties and public safety. Indefinite confinement after a completed sentence raises due process and proportionality concerns. Yet some argue that this loss is validated by terms of public safety. Research has shown that approximately 13% of offenders will meet successful outcomes from participating in sex offender programs, meaning that 87% will not, and potentially go on and sexually recidivate. So the question then becomes, how can we ensure that the 87% are not released while the 13% can gain their liberties? Hence why sexually violent predator laws need to better balance safety and defender rights. And this can be done by ongoing improvements in risk assessment and legal safeguards as necessary. So while the Jimmy Rice Act and sex offender statutes look good on paper, they're not executed properly, at least not in the state of Florida. The legal system really needs to become more stringent in completing the risk assessments before these individuals are meant to be paroled, and not just parole them due to lack of space in prisons and hospitals if they're not truly ready to be safe members of society. Thank you.